Hey everybody, my name is Dave Josephsen, and I work on the ops team at Librato. And in fact, you've caught me in a bit of a transitional period because I've recently decided to move back to ops from spending 2 years as Librato's developer evangelist, which has been a really sort of fascinating role for me. It's given me the opportunity to really kind of branch out and like take on new skills, perfect things that I otherwise may not have worked on. Here's me doing an all-male panel, which is just one of the many thought leader power moves that I've perfected over the course of the last several years in my role as developer evangelist. I can now do that faux earnest, touching my fingers together while wearing a blazer and pontificating at you thing. That's totally in my repertoire. So really, if at any point in my talk you find that my arguments are sort of insipid or uninspiring, just let me know and I can touch my fingers together like that for you. Become super reasonable. I've penetrated the marketing team's vernacular, so that took 2 years, but I can definitely sit in those meetings now, and I pretty much know what's going on. I can force push master from a vendor booth. That was a huge achievement get in this role, actually. Happened again and again. Like they literally can't be mad at you, like, where's Dave? He's vendor boothing. Oh, like, better him than me. So by the way, I've heard that if you force push master, I haven't tried this myself, but if you force push master from an all-male panel, they have to make you CTO. It's actually built into the bylaws. So pro tip, but yeah, the vendor booth has become a bit of a second home to me. We've done a lot of vendor boothing in the last few years. Here we are at Twilio Signal. And I want to tell you something that happened at Signal because it happened a lot in the course of my vendor boothing endeavors where I'd be there in the booth, you know, my fingers lightly touching, and I'd be like engaging with my leads and funnel top the branding and whatever I was doing. And this neckbeardy kind of dude would sort of slide up and lurk. And he'd just sort of stand there, just kind of glaring at me as I, you know, did my booth dance. And he's impossible to ignore. He's heavy, right? And I don't mean like physically heavy. I'm not like trying to body shame him. I mean, he's like laden with discontent, you know? And he'll listen for a while as I dance, and then he'll eventually spontaneously interrupt by blurting out something. Like, what about anomaly detection? And by the way, in every case, this will be what my wife calls a catastrophic digression. Like this interruption will be so abrupt and so rude that it will send people scurrying away from the booth out of either just sheer embarrassment or like outright genuine like fear for their safety. And I want to run too, but I won't because not running from incredulous neckbeards is actually another skill that I've developed as a developer evangelist. So instead what I'll do is I'll don my thought leader cap and I'll be like, what an informed and thought-provoking question. Let me ask you, what kind of monitoring tools are you using today? And inevitably, every single time he will launch into this apocalyptic tale of woe, wherein he will describe the Faustian hell in which he is currently trapped. Like, you can't make this stuff up. Like, his company's product is a bunch of Perl scripts that some consultant wrote like back in 2006. And for monitoring, they have other Perl scripts that are watching the first Perl scripts, and those a different consultant wrote in 2008. And it all runs on Windows, by the way. So it's not just Perl, it's active state Perl. And they'll be sending emails, right, when unexpected things happen, or like, you know, error states are detected. And they'll be using fucking Mappy on Windows XP. I'm sorry, I apologize for using that language, but Jesus Christ, Mappy. And of course, they'll be sending 5,000 of these emails like per minute because unexpected state is basically constantly happening. And of course, no one is paying any attention to any of these emails. And at this point, he usually feels awful, and I feel awful. And so I'll say something like wow, that sounds awful. It must be really frustrating, and it must be just a really stressful environment for you. Like, I'm sorry to hear it. And I'd be like, it's fine. And I'm like, man, are you sure? Like, it doesn't sound fine. He's like, no, I'm completely fine with the occurrences that are happening here. And I'll be like, I just want to give you a hug. Like, do you want a hug? I could hug you if you want a hug. And he'll be like, no, really, it's fine. I don't need a hug. What makes you think that oh my God, hug me, right? So we'll hug it out. And he'll cry a little bit. And I'll be like, you know what you should do? You should just VI that .qmail root file, Mr. Neckbeard, and throw something like this in there. Just dev annul the messages, Just send the messages to the trash and count them instead. And I'm not saying that's like your permanent solution or anything, but you don't even know what that signal looks like, right? You don't even know the shape of it. You might be able to alert on like sheer message volume. You might be able to alert on the derivative of the sheer message volume, or maybe just seeing the line will teach you something that you don't already know about the behavior or rhythm of your system. And he'll be like, you think? And I'll be like, yeah, man, go for it. Like, go get her done, leave happy. And he will. He sort of like, leaves with a lighter heart because, we've had kind of an epiphany together, right? He now recognizes those emails as something other than alerts. Now they're signaled to him, right? And it's a subtle change, but it's a fundamental one. And this is a true story. It's a funny story, but it's true. I've had this conversation 25 times this year alone. And today, surrounded by all of you and my team at Librato, it's really easy to forget. But if I'm being honest, I was this neckbeard. I was him. And I don't mean like a long time ago. I mean like one job ago, this was me. And I more or less knew everything about monitoring that I know now, and yet I couldn't have drawn this line any more than he could. And I can hear you say, really, Dave, like emails per second? Well, yes, of course I could draw a line of emails per second, but what I'm talking about is that neither of us could make the cognitive leap necessary to apply monitoring tools as a means of understanding system behavior independent of alerting, right? Because Mr. Neckbeard can draw that line. He can draw a line of emails per second, but he couldn't, but he didn't. And neither did I. And I think that's telling. So this is number one of the 5 lines that I couldn't draw. And I come across these pretty often today, just in my work, where I'll see some data that we're using internally at Librato, and I'll be like, man, I'll just trip out. Like, I couldn't have drawn that line 1 year ago or 2 years ago. And I just thought it would be kind of interesting, maybe to explore the reasons why live on stage in front of a room full of visionaries. So here I am. In hindsight, it's not actually feeling like such a great idea anymore, but we'll see. In every case, in each one of these lines, I think that what you're going to see is that I didn't have a problem with technical aptitude. My problem was wrapped up in my beliefs and expectations. In this particular case, in the case of the horrible 5,000 MAPI email problem, the thing that was causing our cognitive dissonance. Okay, I'm going to need somebody to throw me a water bottle. Just somebody could cue one up. That'd be awesome. Thank you very much. I owe him a beer. The thing that was causing our cognitive dissonance is that these Perl scripts are already sending alerts. So to us, to Mr. Neckbeard and I, it seems like monitoring is already done. Box checked. This is, we're over. We're done here with monitoring. Because monitoring is the thing that makes alerts happen to us. Like, we have no means of describing an undertaking called alerting that's meaningfully discrete from alerting. Does that make sense? And that's why monitoring is an ops thing. That's why it's about uptime. So obviously ops owns it because it's an uptime thing. So as an ops person, we'd fall into this pattern where we'd install or inherit this like guard dog-like entity. And I would tell it where to sit, and like it would bark whenever something felt not right to it, right? And it was great at barking. Like, it'd bark all day, all night, bark, 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 bark. And that sucked, so I thought, let's train it. So I put in a ticket to train it, but I never would. I'd never work the ticket because it was literally no one's priority but mine, right? So I'd feel guilty if I worked it because it felt like self-indulgence, but I'd also feel guilty if I didn't work it because, the dog's sitting over there barking at squirrels all night, and it's just embarrassing. So, maybe I would. Maybe eventually I would get some time to take the dog aside and be like, listen, thread contention, bark. Ice cream trucks don't bark. But no matter what I told it, it was never something that could help me out, right, with something like the Perl scripts. It was never an ad hoc solution to a problem. Because ultimately our relationship was prescriptive in the wrong direction. The dog was always telling me what I was interested in, right? And so the best we could ever hope to achieve was this sort of like ongoing negotiation about how much barking was enough barking and what the appropriate amount of barking was. It was always about the barking, basically. So here are two important things I no longer believe, and I think that this is mostly what differentiates me from Mr. Neckbeard. First, I don't believe that monitoring is for alerting anymore. I don't even think it's about uptime. And next, I don't think that monitoring is my responsibility anymore. It's not my burden, right? It's not a pet. It's a tape measure that I share with every engineer that I work with. And I think if you've been listening to the real speakers, like the ones who weren't me so far, I think that you'll find that this is probably the most important underlying belief that differentiates them from Mr. Neckbeard as well. People who run effective monitoring infrastructure believe that we all get to ask questions. We all get to measure things. It's not just ops, it's not just dev, it's not just DBA. It's literally everyone who cares gets to measure. And I think it's perfectly reasonable for us to make that expectation, to have that expectation. Thank you very much. And it's also perfectly reasonable for us to expect to get accurate, timely results from those measurements. I think it's also reasonable to expect that we can all use the same tape measure, or at least each other's tape measures. And I don't see the problem with that anymore. I really do feel like that's what monitoring is for. It's the infrastructure that makes it possible to understand system behavior. That's what monitoring is for me today. That's how it works for me today. And it's not because I installed or bought some particular collection of tools. It's not because I learned about percentiles and read all of these man pages. It's exactly because my expectations have changed. Yeah. And I think Mark was totally right when he said that tools matter. I'm not saying that the tools don't matter. But the tools are there today, okay? Which is actually a huge difference between today and 5 years ago. The tools are there. You can build the metrics infrastructure that you need right now. And it's hard and expensive, but possible. Or you can buy it, and that's easier and expensive, but possible. But to make either of those actually work, you still need to change the people. Like no combination of bleeding edge Grafana and no amount of fancy anomaly detection are going to save Mr. Neckbeard until he understands that monitoring is not for alerting, until he understands that measuring things is everyone's job. And Mr. Neckbeard has another problem too, and that problem is that he's embracing complexity. See, to him, those emails are his burden to bear. They're his lot in life. They are the hand grenade upon which he will jump to save us all, and that belief isolates him. It mires him in complexity. And I think he believes that's fine. I think he thinks that the room on fire behind him is a wholly expected component of his day-to-day work life. And let me show you what I mean. This is line number 2 that I couldn't draw. And I can hear you saying, Dave, that's not a line. Like literally you had one job. And the first line was kind of disappointing. It was like emails per second. But the line you're not seeing here is really an important lack of a line. The data that you're not seeing here is the number of people who are currently using the Librado API who are being throttled. So I promise very small digression for context. This is a pretty common problem with us where users will be wiring us up for the first time and what things do they send? All the things. Chesblock knows all about this, you can ask him. So rather than surprise people with like the $1 million bill, we catch unlikely rate of increase with ingest throttling. And we'll shoot an email or whatever that's like, maybe dial that back unless you actually want to pay us the GDP of Uruguay every month. But this metric and a whole bunch of metrics just like it are physically mounted to the wall next to our support team because those are the guys who are going to be there to help that user understand why the HTTP 500s are happening, right? But the interesting part, my actual point in this entire digression is that these metrics were in fact not created by the support team. These metrics were put in place by the engineer who implemented throttling to understand what that signal looked like. And that made me wonder, like, how did this happen? Like, how did a first-level support team begin repurposing API metrics? Like, I reach into my mind and I'm like Like, how does that even work? Was there like some cuddly API engineer who in a spontaneous bout of altruism went to go like DevOps cuddle with the support team and like make rainbow metrics babies of team spirit? Because that's amazing. Like, I want to meet these API engineers. I've never met an API engineer who wanted to DevOps cuddle with support and teach them about like how API throttling works. So I went to go talk to them. And no, they seem like typical engineers who exhibit sort of the typical demeanor and mannerisms that one expects software engineers to manifest. I think it's fair to say that they were very, very high velocity, but they were also not necessarily focused on, right, like sharing their hard-won metrics knowledge with other teams. So, long story short, I think that what's happening here is something like emergent Cynefin. And if you're not familiar, Cynefin is this framework. It helps us make sense of complexity. The idea is that you categorize the complexity that you're dealing with, and then you attempt to move from whatever, like, I don't know, base of complexity in which you're mired to the next less complex category until you hit obvious, which you can see is kind of like an uphill climb. But my time at Librato has just about convinced me that Cynefin can be an emergent property of effective monitoring systems, by which I mean, I think that what's happening is, in the presence of effective monitoring, Cynefin effective monitoring gives you the kind of stuff that you need to just sort of make Cynefin happen. Control, understanding, standardization. These are all things that just kind of flow from effective monitoring. And I can hear you say, like, really, Dave, emergent Cynefin properties? Like, maybe you should have stuck with unicorn babies of team spirit. Like, do you even know what you sound like when you say shit like this? Yes, no, I hear myself. But the processes line up too well for it to be a mistake. Like, maybe I'm imagining it, but when you climb the Cynefin ladder, that's pretty much what you get when you give a team of people a decent telemetry system, and those people are people who understand that their job is to measure stuff. It just kind of happens. And this is a perfect example. Our support team was able to move from a very opaque and chaotic form of complexity straight to obvious by repurposing other engineers' monitoring data. And today, my friend Nick on the support team can look up at that very real, very physical wall and be like, behold, throttled users. It's totally how Nick talks. Behold, throttled users. And you can go talk to them about it. And that's a first-level support team that organically understands the concepts of HTTP return codes and services-oriented architecture and API backpressure. Nobody wrote a manual for those guys on that. It's just Cynefin happening, I think. And I could never draw lines like this knot line. And the reason I couldn't draw this knot line was because, like Mr. Neckbeard, I thought that embracing complex things like 5,000 MAPI emails coming from janky Perl code was my job. I thought complexity was my lot in life. I was totally this guy who would sit down with like the, incomprehensible bowl of spaghetti code that some mean-spirited consultant wrote in 1997. And I'd be like, I hate not understanding this. You know this feeling? I hate not understanding this. I'm not leaving until this is understood. I'm not going to a meeting. I'm not going to lunch. I'm not going home until this is understood. Because that's how much I hate this. And managers would come looking for me like, did Dave show up today? And my teamies would have to be like, yeah, don't bug him. He's dissecting some janky code. This is a real picture. I threw this in there because all the fogies have been sharing like the old days pictures, so I thought I'd show you. This is IBM Global Services, so those of you who worked there will recognize the Long Beach campus. So yeah, I mean, for the millennials in the audience, this is what Team Spirit looked like in the 90s. This is my boss, Steve, giving me a sandwich when I was doing it. But then once I figured it out, like once I had the janky Perl code, I had a model for it in my mind. I would become the thing I hated. I would own it because I would then be the only person who understood it. And then people would, like anytime it broke, people would be like, yo Dave, the Perl thing's broken again. And they'd dump it on me when it broke, and that's perfectly rational. Like, why would they climb down there with me? Why would I want them to climb down there with me? Because pain hurts. It's painful. It's why they call it pain. So embracing it just isolates you, even from other engineers, because there's only so much pain each of us can endure. We just can't go around willy-nilly embracing each other's pain, even though we really want to. It's not a tenable scaling model, but simplicity feels fantastic. Simplicity, obviousness, it wants to be shared, it wants to be celebrated, it wants to be used. I should have always been working to reduce complexity instead of just accepting it, but I never realized that my monitoring tools could help simplify things. I thought that like this was as simple got. I used to make things like this when I understood something. Well, I still do. I literally made this trying to understand vibrato. So I'll draw like a really complicated picture of a really complicated thing. And I was so close, but I never took that next additional step that was like, line number 3 here. To just simplify that into something that isn't painful to understand. And I can hear you, Dave, also not a line. So you're now, what are you, 2 for 3 on following through with the clickbait listicle title you sold us. You lying, deceitful fraud. Okay, Captain Pedantic, here's a line. And I couldn't have drawn this because I never had an amazing dashboard like this to draw it over the top of. This dashboard is amazing. It's a simplification of this diagram. So those are 2 pictures of the same thing. The curator of these metrics in this dashboard took that diagram and made 1 row for every SLB in the architecture diagram. Like, how many words did it take me to describe that to you? And now you know how it works because you understand service ingress already. You already understand that for every service there's a load balancer. And all I had to tell you was, poof, row per load balancer. And you can look at the rest and work it out for yourself. So you have like 3 golden signals here, and these are like, if any blocking outage happens anywhere inside any of these services, you're going to see it in one of these signals. It's, it's by definition, it's guaranteed. If you don't see it, then by definition, it's not a blocking problem. That's ridiculous. And I want to stress again that the person who curated this view is not the person who wrote the instrumentation to get the data. Different people, different concerns, and the monitoring system is like enabling those people to work together. It's acting like it's acting like a bridge to aid in comprehension. I never could have drawn that line over this amazing dashboard. I never realized I could use monitoring tools to build bridges to help other people understand the pain that I was experiencing. The Dropbox talk was the same way. I trip out. I do. I can't help but trip out because here are engineers who have gotten to the point where they're literally just sharing metrics willy-nilly back and forth. Here's a list of our metrics because obviously as other engineers you are interested in taking part in my team's beige. So foreign a concept to me and so powerful at the same time. It's ridiculous. And then one day, just out of the blue, I hire into the shop. Everybody just gets it. Everybody gets to measure things. Nobody owns monitoring. All these people are building all this stuff. They're taking the measurements, and people get a hold of the signals and refine them, and Conneffin happens, and bam, suddenly first level support understands API back pressure. And again, I'm tripping out. Like 3 weeks ago, I was trapped in this perpetual tire fire with this clueless watchdog, and no one knew. Like no one knew. How could they have known? I was alone with my pain, despite being surrounded by other engineers. And now, it's just such a stark contrast. Like, this is line number 4. I feel like I see crazy stuff happening all around me all the time now. Like, this is a metric that measures the storage latency introduced by our API matching metrics names to UIDs. So point being, this is a subtle latency metric. It's one that I can't describe to you in less than 15 words. But check this out. It's being used in the context of this ops guy named Benjo, working with it, which right off the bat to me is pretty crazy. I mean, where I come from in the perpetual tire fire, it's atypical for ops people to work with like latency data that describes job execution happening inside databases. In the tire fire, that's what we refer to as someone else's problem. But like, I mean, maybe Ben is just a really savvy guy, but wait, not only is he working with this intricate DB latency issue, but he's correlating it back to system metrics. So, okay, I mean, that seems extraordinarily astute to me. I'm not, if I think about it, I'm not even sure how to reverse engineer, how do you go from, even if you have the domain knowledge, wait a minute, is he actually talking to data engineering about this? Okay, so savvy, astute, and brave, or maybe he doesn't know that data engineers are mean. Hold on, they're actually responding and working together on him, and so is the front end team? What the actual hell is going on here? What's happening? How does Ben the ops guy have all of this data engineering domain knowledge? Why isn't anyone being mean to him? Where where are the passive-aggressive insults? Like, where's the hostility that I've come to expect from engineers working on other teams? This is dev, this is ops, this is dogs and cats. Like, working together, mass hysteria, it's shocking. I'm shocked. Like, maybe you all live here already, but, you know, having just arrived myself, it's shocking. I've never been able to draw lines like that. I never knew enough about what was going on around me. I think it's fair to say I never had the degree of give a shit. And I'm not sure, like chicken and egg wise, if it was because I didn't have the give a shit because I didn't know what was going on around me, or, you know, vice versa. But that's an amazing line. Like, if you squint at it, you can almost see the bridge that this line creates between data engineering and operations. And again, I can't help but wonder, like, how did that happen? Is it possible that effective monitoring can bring about cultural change? Or was it cultural change that brought about the effective monitoring? Because to me, it looks like the former happened here. It looks like the combination of an effective telemetry system combined with a group of people who were willing to understand that measuring things was their job has ultimately changed how the people interact with each other in this shop. Good monitoring, I think good monitoring changes people. And that's kind of mind-blowing. So speaking of culture, how much time do I have? Does anybody know? 4 minutes? Holy shit. Okay, so there's this guy named Brian. And he's working to make our UI faster. And basically, he does. Okay, he rolls out this change. You see him in this chat transcript. Makes UI faster. Mission accomplished. Good job, Brian. You know. And to be clear, he's graphed the performance data. Okay, homework done, job done. He has a graph showing the stuff he was trying to make faster become faster. But he hasn't pasted that graph into the chat log here. What he's actually pasted is a mouse over of the tool. Like, he drew the graph, moused over it, took a screenshot of the tooltip of the individual data points for a single polling interval, and pasted that into the channel. And for context, not only does Brian work for a startup whose literal singular purpose is the drawing of line graphs, like, his boss at the time, literally the inventor of graphite, and this conference. So basically, he works at Line Graph Co. for the godfather of line graphs. And he basically just walked up to the godfather of line graphs like, behold, my assortment of individual data points. Wait, it gets better. And then he says, ignore the zeros. So amazing. Like, if we ignore the zeros, we literally have 2 values. Like, sit down, Brian. I think it's time we had the data to ink ratio talk, bro. Like, once upon a time, there was a man named Tufty. I also want to point out the timestamps here because it's only a matter of seconds before his team begins expressing their confusion. Like, I can almost see Dixon at home, like, unsure if it's some kind of elaborate troll. Like, maybe everybody got together and agreed to, like, not paste any line graphs in channel for the whole week just to see what he would say. Which is something we would do, actually. I guess I spoiled that one. Anyway. So Brian facepalms, throws line number 5. I never could have drawn this line because I've never had a team like this around me. I've never had a team that actually cared that much about what I was working on. Like, if I came to someone with some amazing data that I was super proud of, they'd look at it and be like, yeah, wow, that's cool, I guess, or whatever, Dr. McShowoff. Anyways, pretty busy, so stop being in my cubicle now. But I mean, look at the love here. Like, these people want to geek out on the data with you. They want to celebrate your win. And I don't mean in like the Fortune 500 goals and gift cards way, but by like actually quantifying the y-axis of your success. Like, they want to comprehend your win so badly that they are confused when they lack sufficient data to comprehend your win. And I find that astounding. So at the risk of sounding campy, I guess I just wanted to say I love my teamies at Librato. I love all of you as well. I really just want to thank you for working to make effective monitoring happen in your shops and changing people to make that possible. And thank you for building tools to make it happen for other people. You guys make me want to come to work every day. And at this point, the conference organizers have insisted that I allow you to ask questions. But yeah, did I? Yes! All right. So we're good? We're good.